Իշտամբրելենք այս հողերում Քաղելու հնձել այս տաշտերում Սերուներ փխել քո կեդերից Մանուկներ ծնվել քո լերներից Հանրային դիմակ ավանթագան Ազադակրական բայկար գամման Դաշնամու աչկը դարածքներիդ Մեր ժմիդները քո ծոցերին Քո անհատականքին Մենք պիտի երգենք բռունցքներով Արդարության ռոշ երակույնով Մատկայնության սեր խաղաղությամբ Մանուկի դեմքին սուրբ օրհնությամբ Մենք պիտի հաղթենք մշակույթով Մենք պիտի հաղթենք մշակույթով Մենք պիտի հաղթենք մեր հայությամբ
Okay, and that was an introductory video, a song by Srstankian Artsakh. Hello to everyone, and thanks for attending this interview to Marco Gombacci. I would like to thank everyone. We know we have people connected from all around the world. I would like to thank the AGBU community, the YP network, part of the AGBU. I would like also to thank the coordinators of YP Buenos Aires, Sol Tabakian, Vanik Malgosian, also Andres Yakubian for his technical support, and of course, our guest, Marco. Marco, welcome here. I know that you're in Brussels, so it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and good evening, good night, good morning to all the people watching, because as far as I understand, there is people from Armenia, Western Europe, Argentina, Los Angeles. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce you to Marco. Marco has had the opportunity to study law and international relations at 3 different universities in 3 different countries, at Università degli Studi di Trieste, Universidad de Murcia in Spain, and the University of Kent in the UK. He also has an extensive career as a political analyst. He worked as a political assistant at the European Parliament. He also worked as an EU policy officer for the British Chamber of Commerce. He was also the president of the Democrat Youth Community of Europe. He's a contributor for the important Italian newspaper Il Giornale. He is also the author of Kurdistan, Utopia di un popolo tradito, which we could translate as Kurdistan, Utopia of a betrayed people. And right now he works as an adjunct professor at the Universidad Europea de Valencia in Spain, and especially as a political analyst, and he's also founder of the European Post. He has an extensive experience covering conflicts. He covered many of the conflicts dealing with ISIL in Iraq, in Mosul, in Raqqa, Syria, and he also covered the first 15 days of war in Ukraine. And what interests us the most is that he traveled to Artsakh to cover the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan back in 2020. And as far as I'm concerned, my name is Sebastián García Ferrer. I am a member of the group of young professionals in AGBU Buenos Aires. I am also part of the Argentine Federation of International Communities and the Spanish Federation. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with you. And right now, we will show you an introductory video that will show you all what Marco filmed when he went to Artsakh. So enjoy and stay tuned. I'll see you in a moment.
Very fast, we're going to this road. Immediately run out. Yep. Come on. Come on, come on.
The guns are now.
Very fast, we're going to this road. Immediately run out. Yep. Come on. Come on, come on.
The guns are now silent in Nagorno-Karabakh, the territory in the South Caucasus disputed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. On the 27th of September, the long-standing conflict re-erupted into a 6-week war that left at least 5,000 dead. The war was one of the most violent between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The use of heavy artillery from both sides has been accompanied by the use of drones by Azerbaijani aviation, drones given by Baku's most important ally, Turkey. We decide to go on the field.
We are entering Nagorno-Karabakh, the territory disputed by Armenia and Azerbaijan. We left at sunrise to avoid the Azerbaijani artillery shelling.
Once we arrive in the ghost town of Stepanakert, the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, we see signs of war everywhere. Civilians are outside of their bombed houses, and there is nothing left of them. We find one civilian who came to check what remained of his house after last night's shelling. Nothing. He shows us what remains of his bedroom. Even the schools were not spared from the attacks. Inside the bombed school, we meet Artsakh Beglarian, human rights defender of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Azerbaijan is using banned weapons such as cluster munitions, very accurate and heavy missiles, rockets against civilian population. Azerbaijan also has engaged thousands of terroristic groups from Syria and Libya.
So we arrived in Sushi, known as the Armenian Jerusalem, and we noticed that the cathedral has also been devastated. And missiles are still lying near the church. But despite the ruins, a wedding is celebrating in our presence between a young girl and a soldier who is about to be sent to the front. We walked trenches to trenches to approach the front line, until we decided to run in an open field to see an Azerbaijani drone shot down by the Armenian artillery. It is a Soviet-produced biplane Antonov AN-2, adapted as a drone, which terrorizes soldiers on the front. But we have immediately to run back into a bunker, because staying in an open field for too long could allow Azerbaijani army to discover us. We are here in Nagorno-Karabakh on the front line with Armenian soldiers. On the other side there is the Azerbaijani army. We have just seen a drone shot down by the Armenian artillery. The drones were decimating the Armenian soldiers before the armistice agreement signed on the 9th of November. In Yerevan's cemetery, there are countless fresh graves of soldiers who died during this war. Heartbroken parents are grieving their dead souls on their tomb. Armenians hoped for peace, but they didn't expect to surrender. According to the peace agreement, Russian troops had been deployed as peacekeepers, but Armenians don't trust Azerbaijanis, and they leave their land behind and drive away on the only road which is completely congested. Soldiers are praying for one last time in their church. And people are burning their homes so as not to leave them in the hands of the lifelong enemy, Azerbaijan.
Very fast, we're going to this drone. Immediately run out. Yep. Come on. Come on, come on. Very fast, we're going to this drone. Immediately run out. Yep. Come on. Come on, come on.
Okay, and we're back. There is apparently a bit of lag, so we've been asked to perhaps try to speak a bit slowly. Well, thanks, Marco, for everything you did. That's really important for all the Armenian people, both for the people that live still in Armenia and for the diaspora. But this raises the first question of all, which is, what led you to cover the war in Artsakh?
This is a very good question that I've been asked by many people, because first of all, they ask me why I want to cover some wars, and sometimes why I want to cover not just the war in general, but some wars that no one else is talking about. And this is exactly why I covered the war in Artsakh. It's because no one talked about. In the war, there are many forgotten wars. And even when you correctly mentioned that I was in Iraq, I was in Syria, I have been in some moments where like no one was talking about those conflicts. Just to let you know that, for example, in Iraq, I was one of the first Western journalists to enter the Christian villages outside Mosul, like in Karakosh, Patella. And in that moment, no one talked about what ISIS did to the Christian population in northern Iraq. So I try to raise the topic, and I try to publish articles, video on it, to make also an awareness campaign, because otherwise even the Western countries and the Western public opinion doesn't know what is happening around the world. And for the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it was a very special mix First of all, because I have a lot of Armenian friends, and immediately they were sending me messages, they were sending me videos about what was happening, and at the same time, in the Italian media, in the international media, I was not hearing a single word about it. So I felt the duty. I felt touched as a person, as a journalist, and I felt the duty to act and manage to go there. And plus, what it really made me the decision to go there was that normally we speak about some words that are, I don't know, for different reasons, but they are more trendy. So there are like words where like the top level journalists are talking about it. There are words where other top level journalists, they don't talk. Since even if I will have a huge success, I will never recognize me as one of the top journalists. I really wanted to go there to try to speak out, to keep this war out of the silence that, especially in Europe, was falling on this war. And it was not simple. Why? Because there was the COVID. It was between the two waves in Europe of COVID. So there was still like a lot of restrictions. There was a lot of problems with the test, with the Green Pass, etc. And a lot of journalists, I tell you honestly, a lot of journalists, they were scared that if they were supposed to go there, you need to do a test, a COVID test. So if they were like positive, they should remain in a hotel, isolated over there. So they should not cover, they couldn't do their job. But, you know, going to in certain areas implicates a lot of other problematic. So you have to take these responsibilities, also the risk that you need to be, you could have been isolated because you resulted positive. So there were like these two things no one was talking about, and the other thing was that partially the COVID was having like the majority of the media coverage was about COVID, but at the same time the world was going forward, and it was impossible to speak about COVID all the time. You need also to let the people understand that there were other things that were going on in the world, especially a war that was at the door of Europe.
Yes, and wow, that's very impressive. I mean, you had a great initiative, and that's why it's so much appreciated in the Armenian community worldwide. I wanted to ask you a couple of things at a personal level dealing about the war. And the first one is, did you fear for your integrity at any point? And at the second one is, do you feel that your work has made someone uncomfortable, and that this, as a result, may make them try to take some type of action against you in retaliation?
So every time that you go to a conflict zone, you need to have first of all, the expertise, and you need to have the awareness that something could happen to you. So also to some colleagues that they always try to go to some war zones, the first thing that I'm saying is you need to put into account that something bad could happen. Okay, you need to take all the measures to prevent something bad to happen, but you have to take it into account because you really don't know which kind of situation you will find, because we are the eyes of the war. This is what makes me proud to go in some conflict area, because I'm the eyes of the war. If I'm not going there, if the journalists, they don't go there, there is no one who is not partial in the conflict that can report about it. So this is extremely important under a professional perspective for journalists to continue to go to war zone. But in the war zone, like it happens in Artsakh, in Nagorno-Karabakh, there were some moments where we really fear for our integrity. One, and it's at the beginning of my reportage, is when we were in Stepanakert. We were coming back from Artuni, where we had to stay, I think, like 3 or 4 hours in a bunker because there were some shellings from the Azerbaijan artillery. So we were coming back from Artuni to Stepanakert by car. And when we entered Stepanakert, the alarm, the sirens started to sound. And because there were like attacks by Azerbaijani drones. And this is something that, on the contrary of the other wars that I covered, when there are the drones, they are much more scary because while with the artillery, with the plane, you immediately recognize what is happening. With the drones, you don't know where is the drones and where it will hit. So we were in the car, and as you can see, there were like also our guide, our fixer, that were like really pushing to immediately go to the bunker, and this is covered in the video. And of course, in our safe house where we were sleeping, we were supposed to sleep with the window open. So when there was some alarm sounding, we could immediately hear, because when you sleep, of course, it's not like when you are awake. This is obviously very common. And a lot of times, like during the night, there were some attacks in Stepanakert, so in the place where we were having our base, and they hit like a gasoline station quite close to our safe house. And when you hear this, the sound is not something that will conciliate with your sleep when you are coming back to your room. And of course, when we were in Martuni, as I mentioned before, when we were visiting some houses shelled by the Azerbaijan artillery, you see that the Azerbaijani were not targeting just military targets. They were targeting also civilian targets. And this is extremely dangerous also for journalists. Because if in that moment we were visiting and we were making pictures and videos of a civilian house hit by the Azerbaijani artillery, that house could be hit again. So you were in danger. So this is the big difference, because when you are sure, or in war you are never sure, you are never 100% sure, but when the normality is that the counterpart is attacking military target is one thing. But when they start to attack also civilian target, that's a problem also for journalists. And the second question was about...
you've already replied to it. If you feel that there could be any type of retaliatory action against you, but you've already said that you have to keep that in mind. It can always happen when you cover war zones. So
yeah, exactly. But one thing, just correct me, because one thing is when something can happen to the journalist in the war zones. But another thing that I want also to underline, that there could be some sort of trying to interference or to discredit the job of a journalist, not just my work, also the other colleagues' work, by the counterpart. So, of course, when I was publishing the video on Instagram, on the social media, on Twitter, etc., of course, there were many comments, and among those comments, there were also some negative comment by a lot of Azerbaijani that were trying to discredit the job, because I was on the side, I was covering the war on the side of the Armenians. So this is something that I really noticed. Then even the other wars, they were not so active, this kind of counter messages on the social media.
Yes, the so-called trolls, and there may be trolls everywhere, but the important thing is that you keep doing your job, and that's why you can tell the rest of the world what's going on, and you can tell Western Union when, the European Union, when they turn a blind eye on what's going on in the Caucasus, in the West. So talking a bit more about the war and the current situation. So if you had to summarize the conflict very briefly in a couple of minutes, what words would you find?
I think that on the contrary of the war that I covered before, this war was more conventional. So there was like two sides that not all the time they respected the international law, but you understand immediately where there is one side and when there is the other side. While when I was covering the war against ISIS, there was some terroristic attacks. So you are sitting in a bar in Mosul or in Iraq, etc., and you didn't know what to expect. I mean, not a bar in Iraq because there was nothing over there. But you understand what I mean. So while in these cases, it was more a conventional war. But it was a very unbalanced war at the same time, because Azerbaijani was supplied, the Azerbaijani army was supplied by the Turkish drone. And as I said before, there is something that is extremely, extremely scary for the civilian population and for the journalists, because you don't immediately understand what is going on. And when you hear like the noise of the drone is something that you will not forget. And especially when you are coming back in your normal life and you hear a sound very close, very, very similar to the one of the drones, the few days after that you return, you are immediately on alert, immediately when you sound it. And after you discover that it's the washing machine, for example. So it's nothing, but there is something that was very, very scaring when you were there. So there was, let's say, conventional war, but at the same time, an unbalanced war for the military power that was put in good place.
I see. And you're describing quite well the traumatic experience of war. Of course, the Armenian community is against war. We do not want war. And I would like to ask you, what does it take to achieve peace in the region?
This is the $1 million question. I think that, like in many of the wars, reaching the peace is extremely difficult. And the next step could be at least reaching a ceasefire. But the ceasefire can last one day or a few months, because after, as we discovered like a few weeks ago, if the Azerbaijani army is starting again to shoot to the Armenian territory like they did in the past week, this is the biggest difference between the past war and the last development about a few weeks ago. A war can start again. And I think that to reach peace, there should be a very strong involvement of the European Union and the international community, guaranteeing that no one will shoot a bullet when there are like European soldiers, when there are Russian soldiers, when there are US soldiers on the field. So the international community should guarantee this, and they should punish, under economical perspective with sanctions, those countries that they are breaking the ceasefire. Okay, and this is extremely important, because if the international community says, "I want to guarantee," but after one of the parts into the conflict, they break the ceasefire and there are no counteractions by the international community, here we have the problem, because the international community is not anymore credible. So one thing is to guarantee, another thing is to punish the one that are breaking the ceasefire. And this is a crucial point for me.
Yes, and that takes me precisely to my next question. You already mentioned something that most of us know, that is that Azerbaijan recently attacked Armenia proper in territories that never were disputed. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you believe that the conflict can really escalate to another level?
If they shoot again the Armenian territory, that could be a real problem. And this is a real problem, first of all, for the Armenia, because as far as I understood, the Azerbaijani artillery shoot Goris, and I slept in Goris. It was a particular city, and I suggest all the Armenian, if you visit Armenia, to go there, because it's very beautiful, it's very particular as a city. And I slept on my way to Artsakh and on my way back to Artsakh. I slept one day there before reaching Yerevan. And I remember that we arrived in night without using the car lights, because driving in the night we could have been a target for the Azerbaijani army. So the Azerbaijan shoot Goris, Armenian territory. And this is a problem for the Armenia and the Azerbaijani, because there could be an escalation, because the Armenian army could not leave this unpunished. So there could be an escalation of the war, but a problem also for the international community, and especially for Europe, because if there is a new conflict rising in a strategic area such as Caucasus, a strategic area for the European Union, also for the European Union is a big problem. So I think that the French President Macron did quite an interesting job in putting together Pashinyan and Aliyev to freeze the tensions. But at the same time, as we discussed before, there should be a red line for the international community, because if the Azerbaijani will shoot again the Armenian territory, of course, also the international community should punish Azerbaijan to overcome the red line put together by France and the international community. Otherwise, the Azerbaijani army will do again next time, and will redo it again. So it's a European interest to maintain peace in that area, and this should be told also to the European leaders, because sometimes they are closing one eye on what is happening outside the European borders, and all the focus now is on Ukraine. But as a European, we cannot allow to have another conflict at the door of Europe, and this should be extremely clear to the European leaders as well.
And that takes me to another of the questions that we have here. And as of now, maybe we will start discussing a bit more about the international community. So why do you think that a large part of the world shows solidarity with Ukraine, but not also with Armenia? And what role does the press play in this regard? And finally, what can the Armenian diaspora do to make the conflict more visible?
Allora, so in order, we go do something.
Solidarity with Ukraine and not with Armenia. First of all, yeah,
exactly. So this is something that is something very psychological. I think it's something that a lot of people see Ukraine much closer, under a geographical perspective, okay, closer to Europe, because they see Armenian far away, something that probably even they don't know where to put in the geographical map. But this is not an excuse. I mean, if someone has studies, if someone has traveled the world, etc., should know that Armenia is under a values perspective is very close to Europe. It's something that when I was visiting Armenia, Yerevan, a few days before, a few days after of my presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, I was feeling like in Europe. I didn't feel a lot of difference between Armenia and some other countries in Europe. So there is this kind of difference of perception about a geographical area. But I repeat, this is not an excuse. And plus is what you said, is the press. The press immediately took the Ukrainian war, and it was first page and it was the first news in the television show in the evening at 8 when all the people are watching the television, etc. And plus, there is something that probably is a lot of people, or a lot of European people, they have interacted much more with some Ukrainians, or they traveled to Ukraine. For example, I'm Italian and I'm from Trieste. I know that you, Sebastian, know Trieste quite well. And Trieste for more than 100 years was under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, such as Lviv, that now is part of Ukraine, is in the west part of Ukraine. So there were a lot of people of Trieste that when there were some images of Lviv, they were recognizing some architecture, Habsburgic architecture, for example. So there was something that we were feeling closer to certain part of the Ukrainian, etc. Plus, of course, the press and the journalists decided immediately to speak and to debate about this war, because this war could have a huge impact also on in the European territories. Ukraine is bordering with 3 European countries, so even this is quite important for the press. Plus, of course, there is also all the energy debate about the energy war between Russia and Ukraine and Europe that immediately attract the interest of the media. So there was something different. But honestly, if I'm trying to find out some reasons, but if you ask me personally, I immediately noticed, and this is a shame for the journalists, the press, and the European public opinion, that there was such a huge difference between the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan that almost no one talked about, and the war in Ukraine. War is war. People are dying in every war, and all the wars deserve the same dignity. We cannot cover one eyes to certain war because apparently they don't interest too much the public opinion. I think it's the job and the work of the journalists to speak about all the wars, to let the public opinion learn what is happening outside their own borders. And this kind of difference was not correct and was a bit of shame for the European public opinion, I think.
Yes, indeed. And well, it's comforting for us to know that we're not alone, that there are people like you out there that help us to spread the word and to tell the rest of the world what's going on in Armenia and in Artsakh, and the risks that come through those conflicts constantly that we have now with Azerbaijan.
And plus, sorry if I interrupt you, but just one example to make it very concrete. When I was there, so I was discussing with different also newspaper, television, and I was pushing, this topic. And I say, look, no one is talking about, we should discuss. I was not asking the first page, but I was asking more space. No? And a lot of big director of international newspaper or local newspaper, they were telling me, yes, but now there is the pandemic. Everyone wants to discuss about pandemic, etc. And this was again another shame about what happened with the media coverage of the war in Artsakh.
And I share your thoughts because as a European citizen, I feel ashamed of the little coverage given to the war in Artsakh and the little importance that the international community gives to Armenia. So in this regard, what do you think that the Armenian diaspora can do to gain more visibility on this conflict?
I think that the Armenian diaspora could play an extremely important role. I think that it was in September. In September, I did a conference here in Brussels about with organized by part of the Armenian diaspora to speak about the war, about what was happening. I let show the video that I did, etc. But something even more important, I think, because the Armenian diaspora can organize big event, manifestation that were organized in Brussels. They were organized in the main capital, but they were also organized like in small city, like Trieste. In Trieste, one day there was one quite small manifestation to support the Armenian soldiers in this war and to make a sort of sensibilization campaign. So these are something extremely good. But I think I think this is under a communication perspective, that one of the most effective strategy that could be is also to speak with some Armenian origin influencer, actors, big famous people, like now they are calling like VIP, but because in this sense, people, when they read that something is happening, immediately they can say, okay, what is this? What's going on? So they can ask more. They can even pretend more by the media. You understand what I mean? So if I'm speaking about, I don't know, Kim Kardashian, for example, just to make one of the biggest, one of the most famous of the Armenian show business, let's say, who is in the show business sector. If you could publish not only one stories on Instagram or one small post, but can do something more periodical, more that it's not just once, but can be something like every day, every second day, something like this. The people are starting to get interested in this. What is happening? For example, I'm giving this example, this concrete example. For example, my video was shared by Bianca Balti, that is an Italian fashion model, an actress with like millions of followers. And in that moment, there were like people writing to me on Instagram saying, I'm asking more information about where they can find more information. So you understand. So starting from a sector that is totally on the opposite than war journalist or foreign affairs journalism, but the people are starting to get interested. The Yazidi, so like this small community in the North Iraq that was subject to a genocide by ISIS, no one talked about this. Okay, what was she won the Nobel Prize. What is the name? I don't remember the name of the lady. But this small community attracted, I don't know how they managed, but they attracted Amal Clooney, the wife of George Clooney, to discuss about their problem. And with a very good communication campaign inside the Hollywood world, the show business world, etc., they did this kind of sensibilization campaign to denounce the genocide they have suffered by ISIS. And one of the face of the Yazidi community won the Nobel Prize for Peace. So, there is always this kind of stuff that you need to mix different world, different sectors to make this sensibilization campaign. In this case, the Armenian diaspora could play quite an important role because there are many Armenian origin very, very successful around the world, and they can play a very important role.
I see. Well, thanks for sharing this. I just have 2-3 more questions that I would like to ask before we conclude this fantastic interview. So, as a result of the war in Ukraine, there is a power shortage, let's call it that way, or perhaps there are different types of difficulties in the European Union dealing with power. So how much weight does the sale of natural gas from Azerbaijan to the European Union have in this context?
A lot. Really a lot. I think that what was that, like 1 week ago, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, did a conference. I don't remember exactly where they were, but did a conference where there was Aliyev over there. And as far as the press corps understood, she didn't mention anything about the war in Artsakh and to avoid the new shelling of the Armenian territory. The European Union right now needs to look to different gas sources from Russia, and they are looking to Azerbaijan. So, and Azerbaijan is using this to avoid the international community to speak about the war. So, to reply, this is a very simple question. It's very complicated question, but the answer is very simple to give. Yes, the gas plays an extremely important role in the sensibilization campaign, in the war in general.
I see. And looking ahead, what role could Turkey, Russia, France, and the United States play in the conflict between both countries?
I think that the most important role could be played by France and the United States. Let's forget about the European Union as a total, because unluckily the European Union in foreign policy is something to forget about, because there are not just different interests, but there are some opposite interests. So it's extremely complicated. But I think that France with Macron and the United States, they can play an extremely important role in mediating and not to allow Azerbaijan to escalate the conflict, and this is extremely important. Unluckily, I think that Turkey is not a neutral player, of course. All the drones that I have seen in Artsakh were given by Turkey to Azerbaijan. Of course, Turkey has an important role in supporting Azerbaijan. So I think that Turkey is not a partial part, and if something could be done, probably is that also if United States and France doesn't want to speak directly with Azerbaijan, that they can also speak with the Turkey, because Turkey can also have a part in asking Aliyev to calm down, not to escalate. But this is not in the Turkish interest, neither. Turkey with Armenia, I know that Erdogan and Pashinyan had a first meeting last week, but I don't know how far we can arrive with this short meeting, etc. And Russia is totally involved in the conflict in Ukraine and doesn't want, of course, an escalation in Artsakh, but in this moment, its priority is in Ukraine. So I think that if we have to see two very important parts that can play an important role in this conflict, now we have to look at France and the United States. And again, Turkey is 100% on the side of Azerbaijan, and Turkey and Ankara can also use Baku as much as they want. So if they have an interest to escalate, probably Baku will say yes to Turkey. So I don't think that Erdogan can be a very, let's say, reliable part or partner. Russia, again, we see that Russia is totally the priorities in Ukraine, so I will look at France and United States.
Okay, and yeah, that's quite realistic. We are all anxious to know how the international community will react now, given that there is another large-scale war ongoing. And perhaps to close in a more positive note, let's go back a bit about talking about the war and the Armenian people especially. For the Armenian community, the role of women has always been very important. Also, thanks to the role of women, the Armenian culture managed to survive after the genocide. So what role do you think that women can play in the Armenian society and also in the diaspora? You did mention one example, a rampant example of an influencer, let's call her Kim Kardashian. But, going from the daily basis in Armenia to a different scale, what are your thoughts? I know this is a very large question, perhaps, but if you can summarize your thoughts.
I think that for certain things, of course, when I mention Kim Kardashian, is because she has a sort of influence, like to break a wall about what is happening. So it's important. But I think that the most important role is all the women, the Armenian women, they have much more a much more important role in a day-to-day life than Kim Kardashian. All the, let's say, the normal people like us, they have a much more importance than the top influencer. And the role of the women in general, for me, is a very sensitive topic because, as you mentioned before, I wrote a book about Kurdistan, and I was with the Kurds in the war against ISIS, and I was on the front line with a lot of women, the Kurdish women, soldiers. And I think that the women, when it comes to war, they are one of the strongest personages that you can ever meet, because both if they are on the front line or if they are on their in the second line, they can give such a strong support to the cause that their role should be implemented and should be also their role should be also recognized publicly, because without women in conflict in all the causes, all our men like us cannot go too much forward. So for me, this is an extremely important topic to touch and to put forward, because I'm very sensible about this. Absolutely.
Okay. And well, thank you very much, Marco. I know that we're out of time. I think that all what you said is extremely interesting, especially because it comes from a new and different perspective. Like we were discussing, not many people in the West, in the European Union, take so much interest in the Armenian cause. So we are thankful to you. You show a very humane perspective of what's going on in Armenia. And let's say it again, above all, we just want peace. We want the conflicts to end. We want a peaceful solution. And by informing the rest of the world, you are helping us. You are helping for us to achieve this goal. So thanks again. Thanks to all the attendees, and stay tuned. Perhaps we'll see you again, Marco. Let's hope so.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thanks to everyone who watched this conference. Thank you.